Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a
What's
light
your
on
story?
incredible. What does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. These are conversations with different leaders and changemakers in the disability community, helping to make a big impact on inclusion. I'm your host for today's episode. My name is Superior Arden. I head up accessiBe's nonprofit partnership program, and I'm very excited for our guest today. So welcome, Gordon Hartman.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. Why don't we jump in, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've lived in San Antonio all my life, and at a very young age, I got into the home building business at the age of 19, and for 22 years was in that business. And then about 19 years ago, when I was 41, I sold all my businesses, which was a home building company, a development company, a mortgage company, a title company, and an insurance company, all in one day. And made a decision that I wanted to spend the second half of my life assisting our friends with special needs. I'm blessed with a daughter who is 30 now, who is a wonderful young lady who has both cognitive and physical special needs. And I just thought that's where my calling was, and it's been the best decision I've ever made. Love every day, have the incredible energy from the fulfillment of what I do. And so I'm very appreciative of you guys giving me the opportunity to talk about what we do.
I'm so excited to learn more about what it is that you do. So can you tell us a little bit about the journey that you've had?
Well, what happened when I sold the company all the companies back in 2005, we made a decision that we were going to form a foundation, basically to help fund different nonprofits that assist individuals with special needs. Morgan's Wonderland, which is a separate entity than the foundation, came about somewhat by accident, if you will. We were on a family trip in 2006. And I witnessed Morgan while we were enjoying ourselves at a pool at a local hotel on a family trip, where she was not able to engage and play with some other children simply because she was not able to verbalize what she wanted. And so the children, being very nice children, grabbed the ball and went out of the pool. Not because they were mean, but because they didn't know how to respond or how to react. And so we started talking about, well, how can we take Morgan to different places where there can be an integration of those with and without special needs to have fun together. And they were somewhat limited. And so we started talking to people and said, well, why don't we build a theme park that would be ultra accessible, meaning that no matter how acute someone's special need may be, and that they could do everything anyone else can do right next to someone who may not have a special need. And then also that it be fully inclusive, that everybody's welcome. And that was the idea behind the beginning of what ultimately is now called Morgan's Wonderland, which is getting ready to start is in the middle of its 15th season, just started. And next month we will be 14 years old. We opened back in 2010. Since then, as we talk here, many other things have happened since then under the umbrella of Morgan's. But that was the beginning of what started the idea of a theme park, like no other theme park, that basically ensures that no matter how acute your special need may be, we can accommodate. The word can't is simply not something that happens in the acreage of Morgan's Wonderland, Morgan's Inspiration Island, the camp, the sports facility, and all the other venues that we have.
I love this so much, and the sky's the limit. So I'm interested to learn, what are some of the lessons that you've learned along this journey?
You know what I've learned the most is that people want to be engaged and bring about more inclusion in the world. Many of the things that we do at Morgan's and for example, at Inspiration Island, which is our water park, which is similar to Morgan's, but just add water, if you will. We had to develop a special wheelchair that could go underwater. And we had to develop special wheelchairs so that those who were in wheelchairs could be through a wheelchair valet that we have, could convert over to a dry wheelchair after they were done and be able to use our wheelchair. Why I use that as an example is because before that was never thought of. And people say, well, how do you do that? How does that get done? Well, it's like everything we do in respect to our rides, in respect to what we have out at camp, where we have an opportunity for a challenge course that's like no other. So if someone's visually impaired or cognitively impaired, they can be 22 feet above the ground and doing things right alongside someone who may have no special needs. How do we do that? What I have found and what has been most inspiring to me is you just ask. You just say, hey, let's take a time out. Let's think about how we can be fully inclusive, ultra accessible. And what I have found is there's a desire on the part of so many people to make that happen. And I think that's the thing that really keeps us going and allows us to understand that the sky is the limit. And that when you think about 15% of the population, 1.2 billion people on this earth have some form of special need and many times don't get opportunities that all of us sometimes may even take for granted. We can change that with little changes. I often say little things make a big difference. And that's what we're about.
That's really great to hear. And I often say, you don't know what you don't know. And when you assume right. wrong. So we need to make sure that we're having these conversations just like we're having one today so that we can hear each other out, understand what might be needed in order to have that inclusion take place. So going back a moment to what you mentioned about children not being necessarily mean, but just not really understanding, what do you wish children or adults even, more importantly, knew about people with disabilities?
Well, I think if you bring up a good point, it's children and adults. I mean, this is many times, first of all, we often think of those with special needs are just children. It's children and adults. You know, Morgan's 30 years old. She may be at a cognitive level of a 5 or 6 year old, but she's physically 30 years old. And so I'm glad that you mentioned it as children and adults. But what do I hope for the community at large to think about when it comes to individuals with special needs and disabilities? And that is, they want to participate. They want to be included. They want to be part of everything that we who may be blessed with maybe not a special need want to do just like everybody else. And so with that large of a population many times feeling they don't have the same opportunity, it's amazing how doing small things like we've done with our different venues can make it acceptable to 100% of the population. And so I think that's the thing that I want people to recognize is be curious. Look at something and go, is this really being accessible? Is this really, and if it's not, let's take a time out and say, how can we make it accessible? How can we bring about inclusion so that everybody can join us? And I think as a society, many times, unfortunately, we think about exclusion, and there's a lot of discussion about exclusion. We're all about inclusion, bringing everyone together. And I think that's a positive message, but it's a positive message around something that is very positive, and that is that those with special needs bring so much to us. My daughter has been so inspirational. I've learned so much in life in general because my daughter has special needs that I think otherwise I would have missed. And I think that's the important thing. There's something there, and it's for everybody to be able to have an opportunity to take a real look at and learn from.
100%. And you mentioned also earlier statistics related to disability and what percentage of the population, but disability meets all of us at one point in time. So even if it's 15% of the global population, 25 to 27% of the US population, that just means that the remainder are going to at some point meet it. And if we have these conversations and set up the right infrastructure or even the fun opportunities like going to a park, right from the beginning, then we can make sure that everyone's included down the road.
Yeah.
And that's a really good segue to my next question, which is my favorite question. When you hear the word accessibility, what comes to mind for you?
Well, what I think of is, and I've mentioned it a couple of times already, is ultra-accessibility. Many times we think about, and it was a great law that President Bush signed back in 1990, the ADA, which is an act that really allowed to bring focus on what we're talking about here. But it was a beginning. And it needs to go much further. So we have trademarked the name Ultra-Accessibility. And the reason for that is we take things to another level, if you will. The ADA has done a great job on beginning the process, but there's more that we can do. There's certain things that are written within that is a beginning point, but Ultra-Accessibility ensures much more. And that's what we're about. And so accessibility is important, but it needs to be Ultra-Accessibility, because if you stop just at the ADA and you say, okay, for every hotel, for every 100 rooms, you only have to have one roll-in shower. That's not getting it done. That's not for the population that exists. Many times they go to hotels and don't have what they need because the rules are just not strong enough. And so we're trying to look at things in a way that we can ensure ultra accessibility with the hope that in time more and more people will join to that, and we can begin to see additional changes to allow everyone to have an opportunity.
I really agree with that. And I'm glad that you brought up the travel industry and hotels in particular, but this really meets every single industry at one point or another. Do you have a message for the business community about what brands and general businesses can be doing more to make the world more inclusive?
Well, I think everybody needs to play a role in some fashion. I mean, you mentioned hotels, for example. Right now, we are working on a hotel that will be what I would refer to as accessible for everybody. And you would say, well, golly, what would that look like? Well, it looked like any other hotel, just like Morgan's Wonderland looks like any other theme park, just like Morgan's Inspiration Island looks like any other water park, and the camp looks like it. It can look like it, but it needs to have the details to ensure that it's for everybody. And it's the small things that make a big difference. And so what I ask companies and people in general is to think about the small things that you could adjust that will allow so many more people to participate. And I think many times we talk about it. We have um, symposiums and conferences, and we say we ought to do this and we ought to do that. What we try to do at Morgan's is we just do it. You know, I'm going to build a hotel. We're in the design stage on that right now. We are going to get a large flag name behind this hotel because they recognize the importance of being able to accommodate so many people who have a hard time sometimes finding a hotel that can accommodate their needs. So people are beginning to recognize that this is a large segment of the population, and it's one that we need to really start to put focus on. And I think that's what I'm asking everyone to do and it's not me, it's I think we're all asking. I think everybody wants to see more inclusion, and I just ask them to join in this opportunity that exists for us right now.
I'm so glad that we had this conversation. Let's make sure that everyone else hears it as well. Gordon, thank you so much for being a guest on the Spotlight Sessions. It was an honor to have
Well,
you.
thank you very much. And if anybody would like any information on what we do, you can go to morgans.org. It will tell you the current things we have. We don't put on things there that we haven't done yet, but we got a lot of things coming. And over the next few years, there's going to be a lot more of inclusion and the whole element of bringing about more awareness to this. So we appreciate this opportunity very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And to all of our viewers, thank you for tuning in to this episode. You can continue the conversation with us by liking and subscribing to this channel, or also following us on Instagram at accessibe_community. We'll see you there.